Good morning. Recognizing a quorum of the commissioners, I will call the August 11th, 2022 meeting of the Cannabis Control Commission to order. This meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022 and is being recorded. Commissioners Carmago, Concepcion, Roy, Stebbins, and myself, Chair Sarah Kim, will be participating. All votes taken today will be taken by roll call. So as usual, we have a very full agenda that I will generally summarize. We'll start with opening comments from commissioners, approval of the minutes from the open portion of the June 22nd, 2022 meeting and the July 14th, 2022 meeting, and a report from the executive director. I anticipate taking a brief break at that time, depending on how the commissioners are feeling. And then the next thing from there will be to proceed to commission staff licensing recommendations. There are 4 change of ownership application recommendations, 14 provisional license recommendations, 10 final license recommendations, and 68 license renewal recommendations. I anticipate taking a lunch break at that time. And then for the latter portion of today's meeting, there are 5 items in the commission discussion and votes section, including a vote on a responsible vendor training applicant, a proposed delegation of authority to the executive director, and a presentation from the Access and Equity Group regarding the identification of disproportionately impacted areas. So with that said, I will start our next item. I'll open up to commissioner comments and updates. I guess commissioners are, as been the practice, I'll open things up to commissioners to jump right in with their comments, and I'll elect to give my comments last. So Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Just again, always want to offer my thanks to the team for the tremendous amount of work that they put into preparing us for these meetings, as evidenced by the number of licenses that we review and changes of ownership. Obviously, lots of news since our last meeting, including the work of our lawmakers to pass S3096 prior to the end of the legislative session. Just want to thank my colleagues, our team, for the work we did to respond to lawmakers and encourage their support for the provisions we supported. And thanks to the many folks out there in the cannabis industry, the many stakeholders that we have who also weighed in. So thank you very much.
Who'd like to go next?
Hi, Commissioner Roy. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Madam Chair and my fellow commissioners. As always, I want to take this opportunity to thank the entire commission staff for their hard work in safely, effectively, and equitably helping to regulate the cannabis industry in Massachusetts. This month, I'd like to give special thanks to all my fellow commissioners, Executive Director Collins, and Matt and Ernesto from Government Affairs for all their work with our legislative and executive branch outreach during the past few months around the Cannabis Omnibus Bill. I want to thank the leadership in both the House and the Senate, the Baker administration, the Joint Committee on Cannabis Policy, and all the conferees for meeting with us during this process. I also want to take this time to highlight the work being done with the Cannabis Advisory Board Research Subcommittee, where I serve as a liaison. I want to thank Dr. Marion McNabb for chairing the committee. We recently had our first meeting under the newly reorganized committee, and we have hit the ground running. We will tackle the current state of research in Massachusetts around cannabis and where there is opportunity to improve and expand. The research subcommittee has also placed on its agenda and will take a deep dive in regard to independent testing labs. Guest speakers and experts will discuss issues such as consistency in cannabis testing and results, standardization and the need for a standards lab, and the need to provide open data around lab testing and results. As Executive Director Collins stated last month, I also want to remind folks about the important role independent testing labs play in the public health and safety of cannabis patients and consumers here in Massachusetts. In the absence of a standards lab, our independent testing laboratories must serve as standard bearers honest brokers, ensuring both the accuracy of testing and the honesty in labeling, regulations and consumer safety mandated. The research subcommittee looks forward to researching other jurisdictions, as well as having a robust discussion around the state of cannabis testing to bring forth the most effective and efficacious recommendations to the Cannabis Advisory Board. In my capacity as commissioner in the public health seat, I have previously visited 2 independent testing laboratories, and over the next few months, I look forward to personally visiting the remaining of the 10, and personally visiting and touring the remaining 8 that have commenced operations. Again, I want to thank the research subcommittee for their work, and I look forward to keeping you apprised of our findings. Thank you, Madam Chair, for my time this morning.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. Chair Camargo, I feel like you're motioning to go next.
Good morning. My mute button was stuck. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I would say ditto to my fellow commissioners. I just want to say thank you to our team every month for getting us here. I also want to give a special shout out to our staff members who review these applications. These applications take hours. I'm being told they take maybe 3 to 4 hours per application, which means around provisional time, which means around renewal time. So I just want to thank our staff who, go through these stuff. I know that there's RFIs that go back into the industry, and I know it could be a little bit annoying to the industry, but I'm glad that we're being as thorough as we are. I also want to just say that Commissioner Stebbins and myself, along with the commissioners, approved a new diversity guidance document last year. And it's great to see that folks are actually using it. So when we're reading these provisional licenses, I can tell, I don't know if other commissioners can tell, but that folks have really taken the guidance document to heart and used it as a, someone as a guide to help folks in the industry. I think one of the key things that keeps me excited about this job is the equity mandate and the equity mandate outcomes. So with that, I'll say that to our renewal team, I also want to thank them. I know renewals are every year, and there's about 60, 70 something renewals today, but the same thing applies, right? We have to go through these renewals. We want to see everything that you're doing, obviously, but most importantly, the equity mandate and the outcomes. So I just want to thank our staff for that, and thank the industry for just getting sort of, really paying attention to what you're putting out there and what you're doing. Obviously, I want to thank our legislators who worked diligently the last few weeks to get us to where we're at. I know that we're waiting for some bill signings, and hopefully it happens while we're on this call today. But I do want to thank community members, organizations, advocates, past commissioners, present commissioners, and to our legislative process as well that we've put in place that has allowed us to, work together as a team, whether we agree or disagree, and move forward on processes. The last thing I just want to say is that we have been, as a team, going through a governance process. We had a public meeting last Friday, and it was very nice. For the second time, we've all met in person, and I think it makes a difference when we're thinking about how do we continue to make this organization sustainable. How do we create policies for past and future commissioners? I always say it's not about us, it's about the next person who takes our seats. So I'm just excited that we are thinking strategically, thinking intentional, and thinking past us when it comes to building a governance structure for us. So thank you for my time, and I look forward to today's meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Concepcion? Commissioner, you're on mute.
Me now?
Yes.
Okay, that was my earpiece. I'll keep it out for the meeting. So I usually take this time during our meetings to sort of quickly highlight some of the events, initiatives, and other highlights that I've worked on since the last time we met for a monthly meeting. But today is very unique, as some of my fellow commissioners have mentioned. And that's because for the first time since the commission's creation in 2017, the legislature has passed major cannabis reforms. And I know there are a lot of steps to go through. It has to be signed by the governor before it becomes engrossed. And there is potential that might happen today while we're meeting. But I think it's important that we take a moment today to recognize the significance of this moment and the magnitude of this impact. Our roles as regulators are bigger than ourselves. And I mention this often when I'm speaking in, whether that be to the press, at events, and I remind myself of that every time we're making policy decisions. To my knowledge, we're the only agency in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that's mandated to address the harms that have been caused by the war on drugs. And each month, our decisions impact thousands of people. So I wanted to really take a moment to thank my fellow commissioners for agreeing, first off, to the new approach here at the CCC. I take your confidence in the executive and legislative outreach strategy as an indicator of your confidence in me. And I will take this moment, just kind of bask in that a little bit, because I don't know when that will happen again. I don't know, down the line, it's entirely possible that I throw out an idea that doesn't really land well, that we don't all agree with, and that's okay. But I want to recognize that this is something that we committed to together, and we did together. And we committed to what needed to be done, and that has been extremely gratifying. By no means am I saying that this single piece of legislation will solve every issue that's facing the cannabis industry, but it is a massive step. And it's also extremely gratifying to know that the years of efforts that have been done by advocates, by licensees, by several elected officials, and past and present commissioners was not done in vain. We do have work to do. We have work from this point. We have work when it gets signed. And as public officials, we have a responsibility to get the job done. So on that front, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about how significant the actions at the State House are. This is monumental. We don't know when this will happen again. It takes a lot to kind of get through this process, but we're here and we've done a lot of work. And I just want to thank you to my fellow commissioners, because we've all been able to do this together unanimously. The one thing that I will highlight that it's not related to the bill is the DIA conversation, because that's on our agenda today. And last month I presented on this at the RSMJ conference, which was the 6th annual conference for the Research Society on Marijuana. And I took that time to talk to researchers about the way that we identify areas that have been impacted or most impacted by cannabis prohibition and enforcement, and what they should be doing to more accurately identify those issues, those areas, and where potential gaps exist. This is really timely because, as I mentioned, it's part of our conversation today, and it's arguably the greatest example of how this industry impacts not only the people who, are licensed applicants, consumers who are interested in being actively involved, but also the general public. Because this is how we determine which communities and people should benefit from the required positive impact plan. So I encourage anyone listening to really pay attention to this conversation, because it is also something that will drive sort of the course of where this industry and this agency goes moving forward. We've done a lot in the last 5 years. It's hard to believe it's only been 5 years, but there's still a lot to be done. And I just wanted to take this moment because I know there'll be more like it, but this is significant. And that's all for my comments. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you, commissioners, for your comments. Insightful as always, and truly optimistic about what's coming for this agency and the industry in the future. And I wanted to start just by talking a little bit about Brittany Griner, who I'm sure folks have heard how things are going or not going well for her. As many of you may know, she was going to Russia to play basketball for a Russian-based team during the WNBA offseason and was arrested for carrying 0.7 grams of cannabis oil in her luggage. and has just been sentenced to 9.5 years in a penal colony, which, you know, I had to dig into a little bit what that actually meant. And it sounds like she will be going to an area of Russia that is difficult for ordinary people to get to and will be subject to performing labor. And it's just troubling to me on so many levels. Not only that she had to go play basketball in another country despite playing for a US-based team, like that whole issue aside, you know, as an article in Law 360 aptly pointed out, her sentencing highlights the inequities around cannabis policies internationally, and certainly a reminder of work that we have to do here in the United States. And so with that in mind, I'm also thankful for the efforts by our legislature around Senate Bill 3096, and I'm hopeful, looking forward to the governor signing it today, hopefully. You know, the legislation ensures that social equity remains an integral part of the regulated marijuana industry in Massachusetts. As Sean, the executive director, is going to talk in more depth about today, the agency has been analyzing the legislation and gearing up to implement the items that are going to be within our ambit. And we're going to be implementing it in a responsible and thoughtful manner. And we intend to use the period that's been allotted to us to implement the legislation. So we adopted a process to update regulations that includes input from stakeholders, and we anticipate using that process. And of course, we are willing to be a resource for the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development and the Advisory Board in connection with the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund. So looking forward to all that will be accomplished in the coming year or so under the leadership of Executive Director Collins. And so with that, I will turn things over to him. Actually, I won't be turning things over to him. I will be keeping the mic as we move on to approving minutes for approval. So I would start by asking commissioners for a motion to approve the open portion of the minutes from the open portion of the June 22nd, 2022 public meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Stebbins. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Concepcion. Do the commissioners have any questions or comments related to those minutes? Hearing none, on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. So next, I'll ask the commissioners for a motion to approve the minutes from the July 14th, 2022 public meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Roy. Thank you. Any questions or comments, edits to the minutes? Hearing none, on the motion that has been seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. So now I will turn things over to Executive Director Sean Collins. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. I will start, as I normally or always do, with some highlights from our licensing portal. You'll see this month that portion of the presentation is, I guess, less than usual or fewer slides than usual. All of the remaining slides that I would normally present are included in the public meeting packet at the end of the packet. That's really to make sure we leave sufficient time for you to get to all of your business today. Certainly happy to talk about any of the slides, though, that might be of interest or concern to you. That said, the highlights, the real high-level highlights are there's 13 applications that are awaiting their first review. That is on par with previous months and I guess consistent with normal workload. Therefore, Madam Chair, as you indicated, there's 14 applications before you today for provisional license and for that consideration by the Commission. There are 43 applications that are awaiting their supplemental review. Those are applications that we've previously reopened. I think it was Commissioner Camargo, you may have mentioned the timeline it takes for our staff to review an application. Those are ones that we spent those hours on, reopened them for one reason or another, and those applicants have resubmitted. And there's 96,075 certified active patients in the medical use of marijuana program today. This slide here is a similarly a high-level overview of overall application materials. We see that there's 1,318 total applications. That said, the majority, 528, are provisionally licensed. Those are folks that are licensed, been considered by the commission, and have paid their fees. They're now in some form of build-out or construction, perhaps even architectural review, but they're advancing their progress. There's 50 final licenses that have been issued. Those folks have built out their facilities. We've been to those facilities, we've inspected them, and they're awaiting their notice and authorization to commence their operations. And as you see here, there's 431 entities that have in fact commenced their operations throughout the Commonwealth. This slide, I'll continue to bring it forward on a monthly basis. It's one of those that I think is an evergreen for our purposes. It's something that we monitor regularly, which is the progress in total licenses of economic empowerment, social equity program participants, as well as disadvantaged business enterprises. And that DBE status is something that's governed and overseen by the Supplier Diversity Office. And obviously, we're grateful for their continued partnership with us and our applicants to ensure that folks are able to get through that process as well and identify as women, minority, or veteran-owned businesses for the purpose of qualifying for this status. You'll see here that there's 97 total applications or licenses for economic empowerment applicants, but the majority are pre-certified. Again, that's not something that it's certainly progress. It represents progress. It's all self-disclosures. Our staff does review them. And what we identify in that context is a propensity to be licensed. We've not done a full-fledged background check. You may not have a location in mind yet. In fact, hopefully you're able to use and leverage that pre-certification for that purpose. You see here as well, that's 7% of the total 1,318 applications. Social equity program, again, the vast majority, 140, are in that pre-certification process. And I think I've noted in months past, we want folks to advance downward in this table here. And the 247 total applications represents 18% of the total applications before the commission. And then DBE status, a good amount, 43 have commenced their operations, and 99 enjoy a provisional license. So folks are advancing through that in that category. That represents about 15% of the total 1,318 applications. I quickly this morning pulled some data from last year and tried to look at this and figure out, is there progress here? There is, but it's minimal. So for instance, on the economic empowerment slide, 7% of total applications fall into that category. Last year was about 6%. So again, progress, but I don't think anyone would declare victory by any means. Social equity program at 18%. Last year was about 13%. So a swing of about 5%. Again, nobody here is taking a victory lap on that progress. And last year, DBE status was about 14.5%. So even thinner margins there. Still progress nonetheless. At the same time, like I said, no one here would say that our work is thereby concluded. This slide here is dense. I understand that. I do try to highlight some of the tables or some of the cells for you, specifically looking at delivery licenses in the top here, marijuana courier. You see there's 26 total applications in some way in the process. 8 of them have commenced their operations to date. 2 enjoy a final license. So that category could be about 10 by the time the commission meets next. Commissioner Roy, you referenced there are 10 independent testing laboratories that have commenced their operations in our market today. There are 7 more provisional licenses. We do allow, it is expensive build. It's obviously very technological. It also requires the devotion of really skilled labor. And so there's a lot that goes into certainly building out and establishing an independent testing lab in Massachusetts, not just Massachusetts, but across the country. You see here there's 87 marijuana cultivators that have commenced their operations. As far as delivery operators, 3 have commenced their operations. There are 17 provisional licenses. I want to call your attention as well to the total here, 34 in delivery operator and 26 in marijuana courier. It's therefore clear that folks are gravitating now to that delivery operator license type, which does allow for the warehouse and white labeling of product. Marijuana micro businesses, you see that there are 6 that have commenced their operations, as well as 14 that have a provisional license. So that license type is a dual authorization for a small grow, as well as a production and manufacturing license combined under one. It does require Massachusetts residency, but it's intentionally small. And so I think that gives folks perhaps a foot in, but may not be the specific license type that they're seeking, given the volume of the other supply chain elements. I guess relatedly, therefore, you see that there's 74 marijuana product manufacturers that have commenced their operations, as well as 235 marijuana retailers. So as I noted earlier, there's 431 entities that have commenced their operations across Massachusetts, as well as 50 final licenses that could be not far behind them. This is an increase to the 431 of 162 additional licenses that have commenced their operations over the course of the last year. This slide here, I think, is the final data slide. So like I said, I kind of condensed and consolidated a little bit. All of the other previous data slides are available in the public packet. I'd encourage anyone to go and review them and certainly pose any questions that they may have. But do want to obviously maintain an update on the medical use of marijuana program for you. You see that there's 96 MTCs that are vertically integrated that have commenced their operations here in Massachusetts. That's an increase of 13 over last year. So in the past calendar year, more than one per month have opened their doors and now begin serving patients across Massachusetts. Interesting data points on the right-hand side table I would just want to call your attention to. We hover just over that 100,000 or so certified patients, and we're nearing that 100,000 or so certified active patients. The distinction there is folks that are certified have gone to the provider. It could be a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant. They've secured their certification, but they've not yet registered in our program. So there is a bit of a gap there. Both of those numbers are decreases over last year. Not dramatic decreases, but decreases nonetheless, in the magnitude of about 444 certified patients, as well as 276 less than last year for certified active patients. Similarly, active caregivers has decreased over the last year by a number of 434. I think that's worth discussing at some point as far as what could be some of the implications for that. Certainly increased access to adult use could be a factor there. It also could be that we have expanded, the commission expanded as a policy matter, the ability of a single caregiver to care for more than one patient. So that could be a factor. And I don't have a concrete answer. These are more anecdotal, but I do think it's worth just acknowledging that there is a decrease there. On the other side, though, physicians as well as nurse practitioners have increased over the past year. Again, not dramatically, by 14 each. So there's more providers serving the marketplace. Again, I don't want to pretend like that's a dramatic increase, but those are numbers I think just worth watching over time and looking at, are there any policy implications to that, which obviously I would defer to you as the policymakers. But again, just wanted to call that data to your attention. So given that does conclude the data portion, there's a few updates I just want to call your attention to as well. I mentioned just before your June executive session meeting that the FY23 budget was in fact signed by the governor. We are obviously therefore grateful that our request was fully funded by both the legislature and supported by the administration for our main operations line item, as well as the medical use of marijuana program. So we will begin in earnest spending against that account. I do believe that, I think it's next month, you'll hear from our CFAO, Adriana Leon, who will discuss both FY22 as a closeout matter, as well as FY23 as far as that spending plan. Directly implicating that spending plan, however, is the next bullet here, which is the legislation that was discussed. It is something that we may want to take a look at our budget spend for this year, make sure that we're accommodating any of those increased workloads and requirements. And also, I think in assessing that, see what might be necessary for additional resources, if that is in fact the case. Obviously, it's going to be an FY24 implication as well, as we continue to think through the policy implications of the legislation, but also the operational elements that we need to then build out in order to ensure compliance on the back end. So segueing, therefore, is Senate 3096 did in fact pass the legislature in the wee hours of July 31st. Depending on how you look at the clock, it could also have been August 1st. So that's how that came to fruition. It is on the governor's desk as of this moment. There is optimism that the governor would in fact sign that legislation, but to date, he has not yet. Therefore, it is still pending and therefore not law. And so we're obviously eagerly awaiting any decision on that front. I also wanted to call your attention. We had a discussion, I believe, at our last meeting about the implications for what would happen if the ability for the public bodies, including the Cannabis Control Commission, to meet remotely was not extended. How would we accommodate that in a formal way, in an in-person way? We were relieved to see that that was extended through March 31st of 2023. That does apply to all public bodies, including the Cannabis Control Commission, as well as the advisory board and the various subcommittees of that advisory board. So there might be some more updates for you as well here. So digging in a little bit into Senate 3096, which is the conference committee report. Back in April of 2022, Christine Bailey, our general counsel, and myself presented to the commission a regulatory timeline and process proposal. It was, I guess, informally adopted by the commission, in that there was no vote or anything that would have been necessary at that point, but there was some discussion about process and how do we engage with stakeholders as early as possible. How do we make sure we're incorporating the thoughts and opinions of the advisory board and other pertinent bodies around the agency, but really giving folks a front end opportunity to influence and advise as to what the policy should be, but also preserving your role as the formal policymaker. That April 2022 presentation accommodated a pending legislative deadline of July 31st. It's something we anticipated. And baked into our process as we were researching, beginning to identify topics that would be of interest to commissioners as well as the public, but also looking at what would be some pending legislative matters that could also be incorporated and required of the agency. And now we have much better scope as to what that now is potentially. Again, not taking for granted that the governor has not yet signed the legislation. So it's important to note that we don't currently have a law. We have a pending proposal on the governor's desk. Those topics that are included in the legislation that directly implicate us, that we would have to then put pen to paper on and begin working on, certainly are first and foremost be the issues of host community agreements, and now the commission's authority and formal role in regulating those agreements, as well as the creation and development of a model HCA that could be used by both applicants as well as communities. So HCAs is going to be a major scope of any of the work that we do. I identify here social consumption as obviously the ability for cities and towns to opt into that license type could begin the trigger ultimately of that application here at the agency. The commission does have existing regulations relative to social consumption. It anticipates a pilot program. I would imagine that in the course of your review, you would like to take a look potentially at those regulations, understand the implications of them, but also see if there's any modifications that you would like to consider. So I identify that as a topic certainly for the commission's consideration. Similarly, the legislation makes some modifications to suitability. And obviously the commission has existing regulations on suitability for owners as well as agents that will work in this industry. And so that does require a review and potentially revisions as well. There's language here relative to municipal equity provisions. I think the commission can obviously, as we have historically, we have existing guidance to cities and towns that are looking to pursue equitable policies. That could be something that requires some update and review as well. And I just call your attention lastly to, there is a study relative to pediatric patients and how that medicine can be administered potentially within educational settings, public and private schools across Massachusetts. So that is something that we are tasked with in cooperation in conjunction with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. All of this we're granted about a year to do, that study as well as the various legislative requirements. There's other elements to the bill, certainly relative to expungement and other matters that are pending before other regulatory or governing agencies. I didn't identify them here because this is the direct work that we are obligated to do. But that legislation goes much further. It also includes tax implications relative to 280E, which would be, I think, a massive support for our licensees that I think are unfairly taxed. And so I think that's a big win for them, but it wouldn't be something that would be required of us to implement. Obviously, I think we would want to look at advising licensees to that new advantage, but it wouldn't be something that would require regulations on our part. So I don't want anyone to review these bullets and say they missed something. I really just tried to call your attention to the tasks that we have and that we would ultimately be responsible for. I realized that was a mouthful, so obviously if there's any questions that you may have, I'm happy to take them. Sounds like I nailed it then.
No, Madam Chair, sorry.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Commissioner Stebbins.
No, I think I appreciate that update, and obviously there were a lot of items that wound up in the final bill that, this commission was aware of, but didn't necessarily take any vote on endorsement of some of these provisions. But as we've been mindful of in looking at the responsibilities of you, Executive Director Collins, obviously at some point we'll come back to having a conversation about how this additional work impacts the goals that you had laid out for this calendar year, and hopefully thinking through where commissioners might have the opportunity to participate in the work. But conversation for another day, but again, just to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Commissioner Concepcion.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Mr. Executive Director, for the breakdown. I had a question about the timeline. You said that you mentioned that we would have approximately a year. Is that for us to enact new regs? I just want to clarify to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying.
Sure. I guess my interpretation would be that yes, it would be to enact new regulations. So the very tail end of the legislation says that the Cannabis Control Commission shall promulgate or amend regulations as necessary to be consistent with this act, not later than 1 year from the effective date. And so the effective date, given that there's no emergency preamble, would be 90 days after the governor were to execute, should he execute. And so it would be 90 days from whenever he puts his pen to that paper. And as far as effective date, and then of course, 1 year beyond that to either implement new regulations in the context of HCAs or thinking through social consumption and suitability, amending those existing regulations.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Collins? I have one comment is just that, Sean, in looking at your numbers around social equity participants and economic empowerment participants, I mean, my hope is that with this new legislation and having cities and towns incorporate and expand social equity as they're approving participants in the marketplace, that will assist us in increasing those numbers.
I think that's an astute observation, and one that I think has the real potential to be a very powerful aspect to our continued efforts. And that's why I call your attention to in a bullet the municipal equity provisions as something we would hope and intend to be a resource on, not just for applicants, but for cities and towns alike, knowing that the challenges they have from just a governing standpoint, big cities and towns, small towns, the resources they have is going to be varied. And we want to make sure that folks are able to implement that in a thoughtful, meaningful way. And we would want to be a resource because I do think that can, in fact, move the needle, especially when combined with access to funding and support. And I think those two things combined have the opportunity to be very powerful.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, I just want to touch upon perhaps we might need to update our guidance around positive impact plans if, in fact, this bill becomes law and licensees are able to satisfy a portion of their PIP by contributing to the social equity fund. I think we would have to provide some edification around that and for future guidance.
That's true. Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Collins? The floor is back to you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Just a
Collins?
few more updates for you, and then I'll return the mic, I suppose. You may have seen that we issued an industry bulletin as well as posted to our website. This was circulated to licensees through the metric seed-to-sale tracking system, and it is relative to observations not just locally but across the country, which is the risk of armed robberies, break-in attempts, thefts, as well as social engineering schemes, and the risk of fraud, which again is not isolated to Massachusetts, but certainly as we see things happening around the country, we want to make sure that our licensees are aware, that they're vigilant, and that they are, of course, at all times compliant. But it's also something that we're seeing, particularly on the West Coast, and obviously has the risk of coming here. It's also just the everyday risk that I think most businesses need to be mindful of and worried of, which is the risk of social engineering, the risk of phishing scams, and those risks of fraud. So I don't want anyone to be alarmed by seeing armed robberies and break-in attempts at the same time. We do know that these businesses need to be secure, and we do require really strict security protocols and regulations. And so we shared a bulletin with industry, I believe it was last week, just calling their attention to that and asking them to be ever vigilant and mindful, particularly again with today's day and age and the risk of social engineering and phishing. It's also something that we train our staff on constantly and regularly. So we feel like it was just a good friendly reminder to stay vigilant. So that bulletin went out, I believe it was last week. Other updates on our website include, and I'm sharing this obviously with the commission, but also any licensees. We updated our waiver form, our general waiver form, which is on our website, as well as a form for alternative security provisions. If folks are looking to seek a waiver from any regulatory requirement or propose an alternative security provision, those are now two separate forms, and I'd obviously call anyone's attention to that as you consider filing something with our staff. And then lastly, given that the commission is continuing to be able to meet remotely, we did extend the ability of our licensees to host community outreach meetings virtually with the explicit consent of the community. It also must be recorded. There must be an independent or neutral moderator. Folks must be able to submit questions in advance. It must be shared with local cable access. We actually believe that this virtual community outreach approach may have a larger impact in making the community aware and informed of any proposed facility in a community, just based on that outreach and that ability for folks to engage not just in the moment in say a high school auditorium, but instead to convene in a virtual way, much like, frankly, virtual public meetings, I think have made government more accessible across local and state. Much like folks can review and see our meetings, we record them, we broadcast them. We think this works as well. It was extended through December 31st, consistent with curbside and telehealth. The reason being is at the time when we extended it, we actually didn't have certainty as to that March deadline for the public bodies to meet remotely. So certainly that's something we would consider as that deadline approaches, but we wanted to at least make it consistent and for the time being with curbside pickup for medical as well as telehealth for that initial visit for patients and providers. And the last update for you, consistent with months past, is just our hiring update. As you can see here, our HR department and our various departments across the agency continue to be enormously busy. We've now onboarded a project coordinator in investigations and enforcement, as well as a project manager for procurements. Those folks have now begun working for the agency. We've identified a final candidate for the role of copywriter in our communications department, and we are interviewing or screening for Director of Human Resources, Director of Testing, investigators, licensing specialists, as well as another project coordinator in communications. And that's not all, there's more. We're also promoting from within, which I think is a really good sign of folks wanting to not just be at the Cannabis Control Commission, but grow at the Cannabis Control Commission and stay here, which is obviously a good indication for retention. Associate General Counsel, Director of Equity Programming and Community Outreach, Laboratory and Testing Manager, and Paralegal were all staff promotions filled from within, which is obviously, again, something whenever we have the opportunity to do, we want to start with looking into our own talent and seeing who wants to continue and expand their career here with us. So we're obviously grateful for their interest and looking forward to their expanded contributions. And I think that concludes my report for today.
Great. Thank you. Any final questions or comments from commissioners? None. We'll move on. I guess at this point, so we will be turning to staff recommendations on license applications. Commissioners want to take a 15-minute break, or shall we continue powering on? Commissioner Concepcion?
I would like a 15 or 5-minute even.
Oh, well, why don't we have a 15-minute break? Okay, so motion for a 15-minute break. We would resume at 11 o'clock. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Second by Commissioner Roy. I assume no questions or comments, so taking a roll call vote, Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. See you all in 15 minutes. Thank you. Okay, it is 11 o'clock and we're now back from recess. We have Ms. Suko Defoe from the licensing team here to guide us through the next portion of our meeting. So before I turn things over to Ms. Defoe, I do, at least as we go into the change of ownerships, I understand that Commissioner Roy has a blanket condition, and I will turn things over to her to articulate that condition.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, my fellow commissioners. As in previous meetings, I've added this blanket condition for all change of ownership as we see more multi-state operators come in to the Commonwealth who might not be as well versed and familiar with our equity mandate, our diversity plans, and our positive impact plans. This ensures accountability for what we as a commission have approved. Let's say it's to a licensee states that they will hold 3 expungement clinics in a year. If the new owner is unable to fulfill that, then we're just asking that they let the commission know, since we do spend an inordinate amount of time approving these. So having said all of that, to help ensure compliance with 500-1045 and 501-1045, it is required that an update be provided to the Commission within 5 days of any changes, modifications, or implementation issues by new ownership of prior ownership's Commission-approved diversity plan and/or positive impact plan, including but not limited to goals, programs, measurements, and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions or comments or further conditions from other commissioners? Okay, hearing none, then I guess I turn things over to Ms. Defoe to bring to begin the recommendations concerning the change of ownership applications.
Okay, the applicant, the licensee here is Evocana Labs, LLC. They're seeking a change of ownership and control of 3 adult use licenses and are requesting to add 1 individual and 1 entity. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, the Commission staff do recommend review and decision on this request, and if approved, do request the approval be subject to the conditions before you.
Great. Based on that recommendation, I would then seek a motion to approve the recommendation to approve the change of ownership application for Evocana Labs, LLC, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Great. Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was carried unanimously. Next, Greenhouse Naturals, LLC.
The licensee here is Greenhouse Naturals, LLC. They are seeking a change of ownership and control of 1 adult use license and are requesting to add 1 individual. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend review and decision on this request, and if approved, do request your approval be subject to the conditions before you.
Thank you, Ms. Defoe. I seek, so based on that recommendation, I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation to approve the change of ownership application for Greenhouse Naturals, LLC, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Roy. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Stebbins. Thank you. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Next is Mellow Fellows, LLC. Ms. Defoe.
The licensee here is Mellow Fellows LLC. They are seeking a change of ownership and control of one adult use license and are requesting to add one individual. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend review and decision on this request, and if approved, do request for your approval be subject to the conditions before you.
Thank you. Based with that recommendation, I would then seek a motion to approve the recommendation to approve the change of ownership application for Mellow Fellows LLC, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carmago. Any last or further questions or comments regarding this applicant? Hearing none, on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Next and lastly, in the change of ownerships is Morning Dew LLC. Ms. Defoe?
The licensee here is Morning Dew LLC. They are seeking a change of ownership and control of one adult use license and are requesting to add 3 individuals. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend review and decision on this request, and if approved, do request your approval be subject to the conditions before you.
Great, thank you. Based on that recommendation, I would then seek a motion to approve the recommendation to approve the change of ownership application for Morning Dew LLC, subject to the conditions imposed by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Roy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carmago. Any final questions or comments? Hearing none, on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. So next, we'll be moving to staff recommendations concerning provisional license applications. Each application will be voted on separately. We have an application for a delivery operator, a social equity program applicant, and a minority-owned business applicant. So I'm very excited for these recommendations. I do understand that some of the commissioners may have some comments to make, and so I guess I will turn things over to, I know Commissioner Carmago and Commissioner Stebbins have comments, so I guess turn things over to the two of you and then open things up, see if any other commissioners have comments. So Commissioner Carmago.
Sure, thank you, Chair. I actually made my comments this morning. I just realized that, which is okay, but I just wanted to just say that I'm glad that I'm seeing these provisional licenses are coming back to us and not having as many conditions as before. And I could tell that folks are using the diversity guidelines that we put in place, and also folks are, I think, understanding the positive impact plans a lot better, and sort of cutting to the chase and making things that are practical and things that are actually accomplishable, things that they can accomplish. So I'm just happy to see that. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Stebbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, excited to see the varied mix of applicants in our provisional round this month, as well as Commissioner Camargo pointed out, feeling the need as we went through this list that I didn't have a number of conditions to attach. So I hope that means that our applicants are paying attention, working closely with our team to produce very thoughtful applications that obviously address the concerns and as well as meet the guidelines and regulations of the commission. So just wanted to add, Madam Chair, when we get to first city provisions, I just need to make a note prior to our consideration of those 3 licenses.
No problem, Commissioner. Any other comments from commissioners before we dive into the specific recommendations? Hearing none. Ms. Defoe, the first recommendation.
The applicant here is Aurora Cannabis Company, LLC. This is a co-located establishment with a proposed location of 620 Ballou Street, located in Holyoke. They are seeking the Tier 3 indoor cultivation and retail license. The applicant received expedited review as a social equity participant. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Defoe. And I understand for this applicant, Commissioners Stebbins and Roy both have conditions. So turn things over to either of the 2 of you to articulate those conditions. Commissioner Stebbins?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to read the conditions and then give a little explanation for it. This is for both of Aurora Cannabis's license applications. The draft condition is prior to application for final license, clarify target goal for diverse contracting, as 2 goals are identified in the applicant's diversity plan in accordance with 935 CMR 500.1011C8K. This is just some clarification. As I was reading through their diversity plan, there was a target goal for doing business with diverse contractors, and then there was another number. So I'd ask them to help us just clarify that before moving to application for a final license.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions or comments on that condition from commissioners? Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Aurora Cannabis Company, LLC, prior to final licensure, please inform the Commission of your additional operational plans for indoor marijuana cultivators as it relates to quality control samples. Licensees that opt to provide quality control samples must include written policies and procedures in accordance with 935, 500, 120, 12I, and as expressly enumerated in 935, 500, 120, 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other conditions or comments from commissioners? Then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation to approve the provisional application for Aurora Cannabis Company, LLC, license number M as in Mary, C as in Charlie, N as in Nancy, 282387, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioners Stebbins and Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Stebbins. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carmago. Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Next is the second of the 2 Aurora Cannabis Company applications. Or no, I'm sorry. So, Ms. Defoe, was your presentation for both?
They're co-located, but
Okay,
generally, yeah, generally, they get voted on separately.
Okay, thank you. I'm still
That's okay.
working on this. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so then, given that, then I guess I would then seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning Aurora Cannabis Company, LLC, license number M as in Mary, R as in Ralph, N as in Nancy, 2822487, subject to the conditions articulated by Oh, sorry, Commissioner Roy, was that your hand up?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I don't mean to interrupt, but I did have one for their retail,
Okay.
based on their consumer education and their dispensing plan.
Nope, I'm, thank you for raising your hand. Did you want to, will you please articulate that?
Yeah, thank you so much. Aurora Cannabis Company LLC, retail, prior to final licensure in accordance with 935-146 A through J, please provide the commission with a copy of your consumer education. To ensure compliance with consumer educational materials, they shall include subsections A through J as listed in said regulation and must also include the number for the Massachusetts Substance Use Hotline. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Stebbins, my memory is that your earlier condition applies to this retail license as well. I see you nodding in the affirmative. Okay, with that said, I will re-seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning Aurora Cannabis Company LLC, license number M as in Mary, R as in Nancy, or R as in Ralph, N as in Nancy, 282487, subject to the conditions imposed by Commissioners Roy and Stebbins. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second. Oh,
Second
sorry.
by Commissioner
Sorry.
Roy. Thank you. Any further questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none on the motion that was seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. Next, Bean Collective LLC.
The applicant here is Bean Collective LLC. The proposed location is 1431 Bedford Street, located in Abington. They are seeking a marijuana delivery operator license. The applicant received expedited review as a social equity participant. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the commission review and consideration. Therefore, commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
And so for this applicant, I understand, again, Commissioner Stebbins and Commissioner Roy, you have conditions. Who would like to go first? Commissioner Roy.
Go ahead, Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure.
Oh, okay. In accordance. Oh. That's fine. Do you want me to go?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. In accordance with 935-500-146-5, a delivery operator shall make available educational materials about finished marijuana products to consumers. A delivery operator shall have an adequate supply of current educational materials available for distribution. Prior to final licensure, please provide the commission with a copy of your consumer education. To ensure compliance, consumer educational materials shall include subsections A through J as listed in said regulation and must include the phone number for the Massachusetts Substance Use Hotline. Thank you.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. My proposed condition is as follows. Prior to application for final license, identify any spending goals for disability-owned business enterprises in accordance with 935 CMR 500.101 1C8K. Just a quick statement on the condition. They did in their diversity plan, which was well thought out. I talk about doing business with a disability-owned business enterprise, but when it came to setting goals, there was no mention. Just want to give them the opportunity to identify any spending goals as part of that plan. Not a requirement, but just trying to adjust for the statement and the reflection in the plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Commissioner Concepcion, you had your hand up.
I did. I just want to ask if Commissioner Roy can just repeat her condition again.
Of course. For being collective, a marijuana delivery operator, in accordance with 935 CMR 500.146 Section 5, a delivery operator shall make available educational materials about finished marijuana products to consumers. A delivery operator shall have an adequate supply of current educational materials available for distribution. Prior to final licensure, please provide the Commission with a copy of your consumer education. To ensure compliance, consumer educational materials shall include subsections A through J as listed in said regulation and must also include the phone number for the Massachusetts Substance Use Helpline. I didn't see any they didn't refer to any consumer education in their dispensing plan. It was absent. So I just want to ensure that they will be in full compliance.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning the provisional application for Bean Collective LLC, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioners Stebbins and Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Concepcion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Camargo. Any final questions or comments? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Next, we're at Be Well Organic Medicine, Inc. Ms. Defoe?
The applicant here is Be Well Organic Medicine, Inc. The proposed location is 92 Bolt Street, located in Lowell. They're seeking a cultivation Tier 2 indoor license. The applicant received general review. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
Thank you, Ms. Defoe. Commissioner Roy, I understand you have a condition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Be Well Organics Medicine, Inc. Cultivation Tier 2 Indoor. Prior to final licensure, please inform the Commission of your additional operational plans for indoor marijuana cultivators as it relates to quality control samples. Licensees that opt to provide quality control samples must include written policies and procedures in accordance with 935 CMR 500-120-12I and in satisfaction with 935 CMR 500-120-14. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation for a provisional license as for Be Well Organic Medicine, Inc., subject to the conditions imposed by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Roy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Stebbins. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, then on the motion that has been seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. Next, DMS Trinity LLC.
The applicant here is DMS Trinity LLC, doing business as Trinity Naturals. The proposed location is 262nd Street, located in Chelsea. They are seeking a retail license. The applicant received expedited review as a social equity participant. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
And for this, Commissioner Roy, you had a condition as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. DMS Trinity LLC, prior to final licensure in accordance with 935 CMR 146 A through J, please provide the Commission with a copy of your consumer education to ensure compliance. Consumer educational materials shall include subsections A through J as listed in said regulation and must also include the phone number for the Massachusetts Substance Use Helpline. Thank you.
Questions or comments or additional conditions from commissioners? Right, hearing none, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning the provisional license application for DMS Trinity LLC, doing business as Trinity Naturals, subject to the conditions imposed by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Roy. Thank you. Any final questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Thank you. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Next is First City Provisions, Inc., doing business as Legends. Mr. Foe? Oh, yes, and I'm sorry. Can we?
Let Suko go first.
Okay.
Okay. The applicant here is First City Provisions, Inc., doing business as Legends. This is the co-located establishment with a proposed location of 89 South Street, located in Holyoke. They are seeking a cultivation tier 1 indoor license, a product manufacturing and retail license. This applicant received expedited review as a minority-owned business. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
Commissioner Stebbins, before I turn the microphone over to you, can I just ask, so Mr. Foe, I didn't hear you mention the retail.
Yes, it was for cultivation, product manufacturing, and retail.
And retail. Okay, I'm sorry. I missed that.
That's okay.
Commissioner Stebbins?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that I had an opportunity to meet and work with the applicant for this license, Mr. Clemens, during my tenure on the Mass Gaming Commission. However, certainly don't believe that that working relationship in any way hinders me from objectively reviewing these applications.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Commissioner Roy, I know that you have some conditions for this licensee. Are they, do you want to just articulate them all right now?
Yes.
Well, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's one for each. So one for each individual license. So I'll read them. First City Provisions, Inc., for their cultivation tier 2 indoor. Prior to final licensure, please inform the Commission of your additional operational plans for indoor marijuana cultivators as it relates to quality control samples. Licensees that opt to provide quality control samples must include written policies and procedures in accordance with 935 CMR 500-120-12I and in satisfaction with 935 500-120-14. The next one is for First City Provisions, Inc., product manufacturing. Prior to your final licensure, please inform the Commission of your additional operational plans for product manufacturers. As it relates to quality control samples, licensees that opt to provide quality control samples must include written policies and procedures in accordance with 935 500-135K and expressly enumerated in 935 500-139. And finally, retail. First City Provisions, Inc. Retail, prior to final licensure in accordance with 935 500-146 A through J. Please provide the Commission with a copy of your consumer education to ensure compliance. Consumer educational materials shall include subsections A through J as listed in said regulation and must also include the phone number for the Massachusetts Substance Use Helpline. Thank you. That was a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation for provisional license concerning First City Provisions Incorporated doing business as Legends. The 3 licenses, the first one, M as in Nancy, C as in Charlie, N as in Nancy, 283405 second one is license number M as in Mary, P as in Peter, N as in Nancy, 282048. And the third is license number M as in Mary, R as in Ralph, N as in Nancy, 284138, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Concepcion. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carmago. Any last questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. Next, High City Cannabis Group.
The applicant here is High Street Cannabis Group, LLC. The proposed location is 200 High Street, located in Boston. They are seeking a retail license. This applicant received expedited review as a social equity participant. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Roy, you had a condition?
No. Which,
No? Okay.
no.
My apologies. My apologies. Okay. Well, with that said, then I would then seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning the provisional application for High City Cannabis Group, LLC. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Carmago. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Roy. Thank you. Any last questions or comments? Hearing none, then on the motion, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Next, Holistic Health Group.
The applicant here is Holistic Health Group, Inc., doing business as Suncrafted. The proposed location is 477 Wareham Street, located in Middleborough. They are seeking a retail license. This applicant received MTC priority review. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Roy, I have down here, you have a condition for this.
I do. Holistic Health Group, Inc., retail. Please be prepared to provide the Commission with reliable and current audience composition data for item number 4 as listed in your dispensing plan. Specifically, Holistic Health Group will communicate with customers and patients through social media platforms such as Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. In accordance with 935-500-105-8B2, advertising is prohibited by means of television, radio, internet, mobile applications, social media, or other electronic communication, billboard, or other outdoor advertising or print publication unless at least 85% of the audience is reasonably expected to be 21 years of age or older as determined by reliable and current audience composition data. And if I could just expound upon that, I have never seen, me personally, in a dispensing plan that a licensee will directly communicate with Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. So I just am adding this to be prepared to provide the Commission composition data if requested.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions or comments from other commissioners? Okay, hearing none, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning the provisional application for Holistic Health Group Incorporated, doing business as Suncrafted, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Concepcion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Stebbins. Thank you. Any final questions or comments? Hearing none then on the motion, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. Lucky 7 Cannabis Inc.
The applicant here is Lucky 7 Cannabis Inc. The proposed location is 0 Timber Swamp Road, located in Westfield. They are seeking a cultivation tier 1 indoor license. This applicant received general review. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the commission's review and consideration. Therefore, commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
Thank you, Ms. Defoe. I don't have any note of conditions from commissioners on this one. Okay, hearing, and any last minute conditions from commissioners? Hearing none then, I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning the provisional application for Lucky 7 Cannabis Incorporated. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carmago. Thank you. Any final questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Next, River Grove LLC.
The applicant here is River Grove LLC. This is a co-located establishment with a proposed location of 475 Canal Street, located in Holyoke. They are seeking a cultivation tier 8 indoor and product manufacturing license. The applicant received expedited review as a social equity participant. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the commission's review and consideration. Therefore, commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
Thank you, Ms. Defoe. Commissioner Roy, I understand you have conditions for both the licenses or both applications. So would you like to articulate both of them?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
The first one is River Group LLC, cultivation tier 8 indoor. Prior to final licensure, please inform the commission of your additional operational plans for indoor marijuana cultivators as it relates to quality control samples. Licensees that opt to provide quality control samples must include written policies and procedures in accordance with 935, 500, 120, 12I, in a satisfaction with 935, 500, 120, 14. Secondly, for River Group LLC, product manufacturing, prior to final licensure, please inform the commission of your additional operational plans for product manufacturers as it relates to quality control samples. Licensees that opt to provide quality control samples must include written policies and procedures in accordance with 935, 500, 130, 5K, and is expressly enumerated in 935, 500, 139. That was a lot again. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments or conditions from commissioners? Hearing none, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning the provisional applications for River Grove LLC. The two license numbers are, the first one is M as in Mary, C as in Charlie, N as in Nancy, 283-618. The second application is application number M as in Mary, P as in Peter, N as in Nancy, 282-129, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Roy. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Stebbins. Thank you. Any final questions or comments? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. And last but not least, Rockland Old Exit 14 Incorporated.
The applicant here is Rockland Old Exit 14 Incorporated, doing business as Green Rock Cannabis. The proposed location is 1015 Hingham Street, located in Rockland. They are seeking a retail license. This applicant received general review. Additional information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend the issuance of a provisional license subject to the conditions before you.
Thank you, Ms. Defoe. Commissioner Roy, you have a condition on this one?
I do, Madam Chair, but first I want to just give them a little shout out for their name because they changed the exit numbers. And if you're like me, I still remember the old exit numbers. So this was really creative on their part. So for Rockland Old Exit 14 Inc., prior to final licensure in accordance with 935 CMR 146A through J, please include the phone number for the Massachusetts Substance Use Helpline on your consumer education. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments or conditions from commissioners? Commissioner Stebbins?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not to offer a condition, but in the past, I've spoken up when I saw applicants, when it comes to their diversity plan, use a rather cut and paste language that our diversity plan will reflect the diversity of the entire Commonwealth. I haven't really favored that approach. I really don't think that really helps you create a plan that is your own and reflects the community or the region where you're going to locate. So I flagged that for this applicant and just encourage them to adjust their goals and think it through with respect to the region of the state that they're going to be in, and move away and encourage other future applicants to move away from adopting these kind of statewide numbers as how you're going to approach your diversity plan.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Stebbins. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, great. So then, hearing none, I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation concerning the provisional application for Rockland Old Exit 14 Incorporated, doing business as Green Rock Cannabis, subject to the conditions articulated by Commissioner Roy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So,
Thank you, Commissioner Carmago. Is there a second?
second.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Any final questions or comments? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. Great. So now we're on to final license recommendations. These recommendations will be voted on as a group. I will just note that there are 2 outdoor cultivator applications and a medical marijuana applicant, and so that's very exciting. Ms. Defoe, do you have any statements or comments you'd like to make before I seek a motion?
Not at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to give special recognition to Chief GB and NOAM and their team, that so much goes into these post-provisional license inspection reports. This is where, as commissioners, we see how our conditions are applied and enforced, if you will, and to go through how thorough their inspections are. I read all the notices of deficiencies and how and why they're applied, and it's not lost on me, and I just want to say that I know the work. I appreciate the work that goes into these inspections to get us ready for today to vote on the final license. And I just want to give them a special recognition at today's meeting for all the work that goes into these reports to get us ready to where we are today. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay. Hearing none, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendations for final license applicants as outlined here on the agenda for August 11th, 2022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion. Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. Any final questions or comments before we take a vote? Hearing none, then on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. And next, we'll turn to staff recommendations on license renewals, which will be voted on, generally voted on in two groups, the adult use and the medical use. But just a few things. First, Commissioner Stebbins has a couple comments that he wanted to make, and Commissioner Carmago has a recusal. So I anticipate we'll do the adult use in 2 votes and then the medical in 2 votes. So Commissioner Stebbins, I guess turn things over to you first for your condition and your general comments.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, a nice set of renewals. Just want to acknowledge a couple of licensees. I believe it's Cultivana exceeding their diversity goals and hiring from DI areas. Excited to read about Mass Grow and their anticipated contributions to their We Grow Fund as part of their positive impact plan. Also acknowledging Mayflower Medicinals, they kicked off an internship program that had a very strong number of over 200 applicants. They confess that there's more work to do, but certainly encouraged by the interest in their program. I do need to ask or remind renewal licensees to not lose focus on their diversity plans. Continue to encourage our licensees to remain aware of identifying some local sources and resources in their plan. If you're in Framingham, don't identify a source you want to work with that might be completely out of your geographic area. I have to admit, I was somewhat dismayed that we had one applicant who said that it had failed to reach its goal of contracting with one disadvantaged business enterprise and one local small business enterprise at one location. That's really tough to comprehend. Obviously, there's some effort and work needed there, and perhaps some opportunities here for the market participation CAB subcommittee to meet and have some conversations around this topic. But thank you for the chance to make those comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Commissioner Carmago?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again. Yes, I definitely ditto Commissioner Stebbins. Thank you so much for those comments. My comments are brief. I would say Atlas Marketplace. Just want to give them a shout out for recruiting and mentoring and coaching pro bono 3 social equity applicants. So it seems like they've been doing a lot of work to work with those 3 applicants. And it's also Plymouth Armor Group. Bailey's Bud, providing tours for SCP and EEAs for folks who have commenced operations. I know it's been a journey, but for those who are not open, providing a tour for folks that are in the pipeline is very key. So I'm glad that Bailey's Buds is doing that. Cultivana, expungement clinics, thank you for that. And also kudos on seeking a local artist to design your LGBTQIA drink design for the month of Pride. So I think, clever and local as well. So thank you for that. Good Chemistry, they did a nice donation to a local nonprofit organization. Sear Naturals, want to give them a shout out. They did a substantial donation to the Transgender Emergency Fund of Massachusetts. So those are my comments. Thank you so much, and continue to keep our eyes on renewals as it relates to the equity mandate once folks have commenced operation. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Just for my own clarification, so Commissioner Stebbins, I had thought that you had a condition for HVV Massachusetts.
Yes, Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair. I forgot to mention that. I do have a condition for HVV Massachusetts in the 3 adult use licenses they have in front of us, as well as the medical license they have in front of you. So that's HVV Massachusetts, MPR 243817, MCR 140272, MRR 206133, and RMD 1185. The condition is within 30 business days of approval of application for renewal, provide updated attestation of response from the host community of Gloucester related to the operation of the establishment in accordance with 935 CMR 500.103 4B and 4F. Just for clarification, the attestations that were provided, I believe were had the wrong name of the host community in their attestation, so I just encourage them to go back and correct that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Camargo, I understand you had a condition for Sierra Naturals.
Correct.
Okay.
So
I give
Sierra
the microphone to you to articulate that.
Not a problem. So Sierra Naturals has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 license up for renewal. And the condition is for licensee to clarify and explain how a $5,000 membership donation to the Boston Chamber of Commerce promotes and encourages full participation in the regulated cannabis industry by individuals from communities disproportionately harmed by cannabis prohibition and enforcement, and to positively impact those communities under MGL 94G.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions or comments from other commissioners? Okay, hearing none then. So Commissioner Camargo, I understand you are recusing yourself from Commonwealth Alternative. They have both adult use and medical licenses up for renewal. So my plan is then on the adult use to break that up. So seek a motion to approve the adult use licenses excluding Commonwealth Alternative for the first part, and then on the second motion will just be the Commonwealth Alternative applications. So, and then for that latter motion, I'll ask you to go off camera. So, and then similarly for on the medicinal side, seek a motion that would allow you to vote, and then the second vote would be allowing you to recuse yourself. So with that in mind, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendations for adult use license renewals, specifically items 1 through 9 and 14 through 61, subject to the conditions imposed by Commissioners Stebbins and Camargo. Is there a motion?
Oh, Commissioner Stebbins, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second. Oh,
And
sorry.
I think I heard Commissioner Concepcion. Yeah. Great. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, then on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. So now I'd ask Commissioner Camargo to go off camera, be muted. Terrific. So then, so this group is agenda items 10 through 13. It does not include any entity for which there is a condition on the renewal. So for this, I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation for adult use license renewals, specifically items 10 through 13 on the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. Any final questions or comments? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. So let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously with the participating commissioners. Commissioner Carmago was off camera and did not participate in the vote. Great. Commissioner Carmago, will you come back for the medical portion? Great. The record shows she is back. So for this portion, I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation for medical license renewals, specifically items number 64 through 68 on the agenda, subject to the conditions imposed by Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Any final questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. So Commissioner Carmago, off camera, please. Great. So for this final vote, I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation for medical license renewals, specifically items number 62 and 63 on the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Roy, any final questions or comments? Hearing none on the motion that has been seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously by the participating commissioners and that Commissioner Carmago was off camera and did not participate in the vote. Thank you. So we're now at noon and we have finished all the license recommendations. Thank you to all the, congratulations to all the licensees who either got had their applications approved. I guess at this juncture, what is the feeling of the commissioners? Would you like to take a lunch break? Would you like to continue on?
I would say it's a good time for a lunch break because we have a heavy afternoon.
Okay, great. So then half an hour? Usual. Okay, great. So then I would seek a motion to take a half-hour recess. We'll return, let's just say maybe a little more than half an hour. At 12:30, we'll be back. So is there a motion?
So moved.
And
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Stebbins. And for the record, it was a motion by Commissioner Carmago. I assume no questions or comments or objections. Then I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Carmago,
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion,
Aye.
Commissioner Roy,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Motion approved unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Defoe, for taking us on this journey, and see everyone at 12:30.
Nice job, Suko.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 12:30 and we are back, though I don't see Commissioner Camargo. There she is.
Sorry about that, team. My computer decided to restart.
Problem. Well, I hope everyone had a nice lunch. And so we're now at the last part of today's meeting, the commission discussions and votes. And as I mentioned earlier this morning, there are 5 items for this section. And the first one is going to be a vote on a responsible vendor training applicant. And Ms. Defoe is back with us. So as most of you know, or may remember from our last meeting, the RVT approvals have been transitioned to the licensing department. And so this will be the last time we have the RVT votes here in this section, and I anticipate, but we will be finding another home for it on the agenda, possibly with the other licensing votes, but don't hold me to that. Although you can hold me to the fact that they won't be in this section. So with that said, Ms. Defoe, will you please present the recommendation regarding Grass Ceiling LLC?
Yes. The RVT applicant is Grass Ceiling LLC. They have applied to provide trainings that are in compliance with the basic core curriculum. The applicant supplied all required information. A summary of the information is contained within the executive summary for the Commission's review and consideration. Therefore, Commission staff do recommend the applicant to be approved as a responsible vendor trainer for 2-year certification subject to the conditions before you.
Great, thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Hearing none. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Stebbins.
I'm sorry, just a quick question, Suko. If we approve grass ceiling today, do you know what that brings our total number to of RVT trainers?
I don't know right off the top of my head, but
Okay.
the director of licensing may. Kyle?
Good afternoon,
Oh,
Commissioners.
here, can I get back to you on?
Yeah.
Oh, there
yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Madam Chair. I don't have an exact number at this point, but it's in the, I believe, the 20 to 30 range. But I can definitely get back to you on that.
Okay, no biggie. Thank you. Thanks, Suko. Thanks, Kyle.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? If we're hearing none, then I would seek a motion to approve the recommendation regarding Grass Ceiling LLC to be a responsible vendor trainer. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Or Concepcion, any other final questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none, then on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Great. And so the next item on today's agenda is a presentation from the Access and Equity Group regarding their efforts around disproportionately impacted areas. So I believe Ms. Juby is going to be presenting on that. Is that right? Great. So I will turn the floor over to you.
Good afternoon. Today I'm presenting to you on behalf of the DEI Access and Equity Work Group, which includes myself, Tisa Chukwueze, Andrew Carter, and Sabiel Rodriguez. Our group was formed in April of 2021, and we were tasked with our first project, addressing concerns that were raised by commissioners in the March 2021 public meeting regarding the Disproportionate Impact Areas study. Next slide. Today we'll be the first of 2 presentations stemming from the work we have done. The second will be presented at the September public meeting. We feel it is important that when the Commission makes decisions about how to utilize the new DI study, there is a full and equal understanding by all of today's commissioners on how the current list was formed. This is what I'll be providing you with today. I will walk you through a historical overview of how the Commission ADI list was created, including why it was needed, the research that was procured, and how the research was utilized to develop policy. Today's presentation will not provide recommendations on how to utilize the 2021 DI study, as we'll be coming back in September to go over our findings from that study and recommended next steps. Our goal with this presentation is to give commissioners and the public information to review and think through in preparation for our September presentation. I would ask that any policy discussion be held until September when the full team presents our recommendations. This presentation has been designed to slowly build to how we arrived at our current ADI list. Therefore, I ask that you hold your questions until the end. Next slide, please. The Commission was created with a focus on equity. Mass General Law, Chapter 94G, Section 4, requires the Commission identify who the people and communities are that have been disproportionately harmed by marijuana prohibition and enforcement, so that it can act to promote and encourage full participation in the industry. Next slide, please. It is often said that when the Commission was formed almost 5 years ago, they were building a fire truck on the way to the fire. But now we have an opportunity as a young but not infant organization to look back and understand what was built and where there may be opportunities for growth. Let's start by looking at how legislative mandates necessitated the initial speed to stand the industry up. When the Commission was formed on September 1st, 2017, there was a massive amount of work in front of the inaugural commissioners. This included everything from finding an office to hiring staff to developing and promulgating regulations and getting everything in place to begin accepting the first licensing applications. Chapter 55 spelled out specific deadlines that the Commission had to meet. Section 55 required that regulations, guidelines, and protocols necessary to issue licenses be promulgated by March 15th, 2018, and that the Commission begin to accept applications by April 1st. This gave the Commission only 6.5 months to develop, receive feedback on, finalize, and promulgate regulations, while simultaneously building the infrastructure to support the regs, and only another half a month until the Commission had to start accepting applications. Section 56 further required the Commission prioritize review and licensing decisions for applicants who promote economic empowerment in communities disproportionately impacted by high rates of arrest and incarceration for offenses under Chapter 94C or drug offenses. These applications were required to be submitted between April 1st and the 15th of 2018. Next slide, please. Keeping the legislative mandates at the forefront of the Commission's work, the mission is focused not only on safely and effectively implementing and administering cannabis law, but also ensuring that it is done equitably. The equity-focused legislative mandates, coupled with the Commission's mission to encourage and enable full participation in the industry by people from communities that have been disproportionately harmed by marijuana prohibition enforcement and positively impact these communities, meant that the Commission had to identify those people and communities and do that work within a tight time frame. By October 2017, the Commission had identified that it would need to hire a data analyst or researcher to identify these communities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I don't know if my computer is lagging. Are you all seeing the slide that starts with the impact of drug and marijuana arrests?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to move forward and start talking. And if Haley, if you could move the slide forward. Second, it looks like we may have lost the presentation.
I'll give it a few seconds, maybe a minute. Megan, it's good to see you presenting.
Thank you.
Welcome to
It's exciting
welcome
to be
a
here.
public, welcome to a public meeting.
Right, it looks like they're working on bringing up the PowerPoint. Jump back in. So the commission began a procurement process in October 2017 for a study on the impact of drug and marijuana arrests on local communities. Dr. Getman, a professor of criminal justice at Shenandoah University in Winchester, Virginia, was hired. He is a statistician and criminal justice expert who has been doing research on marijuana arrests since 2003. And if we can go back to slide 6, please. Thank you. He holds a PhD in public policy, specializing in regional economic development, and a master's in justice with a specialty in drug policy. The commission charged him with doing a race-neutral examination of which Massachusetts communities have been disproportionately impacted by prior enforcement of marijuana and other drug laws in the Commonwealth. His report was completed and provided to the commission on December 8th of 2017. The data sources used for this report were the Uniform Crime Reporting Program and local economic data from the American Community Survey. It examined the time period of 2006 to 2010, and this represents 3 years prior to decriminalization and 2 years following decriminalization of cannabis in Massachusetts. In this report, municipalities were scored using 4 data points: arrest rates, population size, poverty level, and unemployment rate. Population size, poverty level, and unemployment rate collectively represent 1/3 of the weight of the score, while arrest rates represent 2/3 of the weight of the score. There were 2 different arrest rates considered: rates of all drug arrests and rates of marijuana arrests. As 2 different arrest rates were considered, 2 different lists were created. In the next 2 slides, we'll look at why the 2 different arrest data points were considered, and then I will explain how the commission went from 2 lists to our current one, ADI list. Next slide, please. The January 9th, 2018 public meeting, there was an overview of Dr. Getman's findings, which included an explanation of why different data points were considered and recommendations on how to use the information to form the commission-defined areas of disproportionate impact. First, we're going to look at why drug arrests were considered. The law requires that the commission prioritize review and licensing decisions for applicants who demonstrate experience in or business practices that promote economic empowerment in communities disproportionately impacted by high rates of arrest and incarceration for offenses under the Controlled Substances Act. This is reflected in our regulations as the economic empowerment priority review of applicants. And these applications were only accepted for that short period of time of April 1st through the 15th of 2018, as required by the legislative mandate. The The list on the right side of the slide represents the top 20 scoring municipalities for all drug arrests. The list to the left of that is the current ADI list. And on the drug arrest list, those that are highlighted in green are those that did not score in the top 20 represented in gray. And I'm sorry. So everything in green, you're seeing it's scored on the top 20 of drug arrests, and everything in gray on our ADI list is not scored on this drug arrest list. Next slide, please. So now we're going to look at why marijuana arrests were considered. The law also requires that the commission have procedures and policies to promote and encourage full participation in the regulated industry by people from communities that have been previously disproportionately harmed by marijuana prohibition and enforcement, and to positively impact those communities. So this is reflected in our regulations in the social equity program, and this continues to accept applications on a periodic basis. The list on the right side of the slide represents the top 21 scoring municipalities for all marijuana arrests. You'll notice that this list has 21 municipalities listed rather than 20, and this is because both Braintree and North Adams received the same score of 114. The list to the left is the current ADI list, with those that scored on the list on the right represented in green, and those that did not score in that list represented in gray. Next slide, please. So how did we go from the two lists addressing two different mandates to the one current list? Commissioners had concerns that there would be confusion if there were two different lists, and noted that the majority of municipalities were represented on both. They combined the two lists, and there were 12 municipalities that scored on both. The municipalities highlighted in orange on both the right and left lists represent those that are on both. Removing the duplicates resulted in a list of 29 municipalities. This is represented by our current ADI list sitting in the middle. It was also noted that large cities contain areas that are disproportionately impacted compared to others within the city. Therefore, the largest cities were evaluated on the neighborhood level. We will look at this on the next slide. Next slide, please. To understand how to divide the largest cities, Dr. Getman completed an extension of the first study. This report was provided to the Commission on January 8th, 2018, in preparation for the January 9th public meeting. The report analyzed if there is a statistical correlation between unemployment levels and arrest rates within census tracts of the largest cities of the Commonwealth, meaning it was looking to understand if unemployment could be used as a proxy for arrest impacts. The report concluded that unemployment rates within the largest cities is an appropriate measure to identify areas most affected by drug enforcement. Next slide, please. The Commission further defined the largest cities of Massachusetts as those with a population of 100,000 or more. This left Boston, Worcester, Springfield, and Lowell to be considered. As a result of that conclusion, Dr. Getman did a final study to identify the top 25% of census tracts according to unemployment data in these cities. This was completed on April 2nd of 2018, and it also examined the time period of 2006 through 2010 and relied on data from the US Census Bureau. Next slide, please. This slide shows all of the census tracts identified in the study as having the top 25% of rates of unemployment within the 4 cities included on the ADI list and with populations of 100,000 or more. So in Boston, 178 tracts were reviewed. 25% of that is 48 tracts. And the 48 census tracts with the highest rates of unemployment all had unemployment levels above 11.3%. For Worcester, 58 census tracts were reviewed. 25% of this is 15 tracts, of which all had unemployment levels above 9%. For Springfield, 50 tracts were reviewed. 25% of this is 13 tracts, of which all had unemployment levels above 14.6%. And for Lowell, 32 tracts were reviewed. 25% of this is 8 tracts, and these all had unemployment levels above 11.5%. You may have noticed that for Lowell, there are 9 census tracts listed, not 8, and that there are 2 tracts highlighted on this slide. I'll provide more information about this on our next slide. Next slide, thank you. In Boston, 6 census tracts didn't have unemployment data available. Only one of the 6, 9817, was in Boston Police District A1. This police district contains the highest percent of marijuana arrests. Therefore, the researcher included census tract 9817 on the final list, despite not having unemployment data for this area. In Worcester, based on our review, it appears census tract 732001 meets the criteria, but it was not included on our final ADI census tract list. This census tract has the highest level of unemployment at 18.4% and represents a public housing development, Great Brook Valley. As noted on the previous slide, in Lowell, there were 32 census tracts to review, and 25% of that is 8 tracts. But the 7th, 8th, and 9th census tracts all had the same unemployment level at 12.2%. Therefore, 9 census tracts were included. Next slide, please. To wrap up and introduce what we'll be discussing next month, we will leave you with the 3 lists that we have discussed today, as well as those municipalities that scored highest on the 2021 study. I understand that all of this is a lot of information to digest, which is why today's presentation is solely a baseline overview to lay the foundation for a larger discussion at our next public meeting. Next slide, please. At next month's public meeting, we'll be diving into the 2021 study, as well as revisiting the facts presented today. At that time, our team will provide you with an overview of our findings from the 2021 study, our recommendations for next steps, and policy considerations for the Commission. At this time, I am happy to take questions about the historical overview presented to you today, and my team and I are looking forward to September when we present our findings, recommendations, and policy considerations.
Thank you, Megan, for that and for your team's hard work around this. It's certainly a lot of information and kind of going back in time and rebuilding and re-remembering things. And so I do want to start by just expressing my appreciation for your team's hard work. Can't have been easy, and I'm sure it was on top of your regular day-to-day duties. So I do appreciate the fact that there's a group at the agency who's willing to take on this task and everything else that the Access and Equity Group does. So with that, any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Stebbins? And you're on mute.
Sorry about that. My canine doorbell was going off. Megan, want to thank you. Want to thank the fellow members of your team for all this work over the last year. That presentation was really helpful to me, and I assume to my colleagues, because none of us were here at the timing of that first report. So it was good to get some of the historical perspective on it, and also, you know, a little deeper dive into the discussion around the inclusion of the census tracts. So thank you for the good work. I like this second bullet, say you're happy to meet with commissioners, provide more information about what was presented here today. I'm certainly going to take that opportunity. Is there any chance during our meeting that we can also get a preview of what you might be talking about in September as we prepare for our work for the September meeting? Or do you want to strictly keep it to a review of the Getman study at this point?
We do want to keep it strictly to this review for additional meetings. We will have an opportunity to give you an overview of what you'll be seeing in September closer to the September meeting, but that will be more of a presentation rather than conversational at that point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Megan. That was excellent. And I want to thank you and your team. I know a lot of hard work and research went into that, and it was highly informative, and I did get a lot out of it. And I appreciate you sharing the mindset of the previous cohort of commissioners, and based on the two lists, why they combined them into one list. So I appreciate you sharing that with us as well. And I very much look forward to next month's presentation and recommendations from the group and policy considerations. It is my understanding that this first DIA report was meant to be a first step, not a final result. So I am so appreciative of having the historical background and the context and text of it, and looking forward to your recommendations next month. So thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you.
Any other, Commissioner Concepcion?
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. That was really informative. I really like the way that you guys chose to use the charts and sort of figuring out where the differences were. I have a few questions, but I guess the first one is relative to that. I wanted to ask if we can anticipate a similar chart that compares the Getman top 20 municipalities with the 2021 identified municipalities. So that's, I guess, the first question, is we can kind of get that seen on the screen in our next conversation.
Yes, that's part of our plan.
Okay, that's good to know. Perfect. I guess my first question was in regards to the procurement process and the completed report date. So I just wanted to, you mentioned this at the beginning, and then you said that the procurement process began in October 2017, and the report was completed on December 8th, 2017. And I know the process is sort of when people are applying and you go through that whole thing. What was the time frame of the actual study taking place?
Everything from hiring Dr. Getman through completing the study was done within that 2-month window.
Do we know when Dr. Getman was hired?
I don't have the exact date, but I can get that for you.
Okay, all right. And then I also wanted to ask if you can sort of expand a little bit more on that missing Worcester track. That was a major piece of information that you included in this presentation. So I just wanted to see if you had any additional information.
So we went through all of the meeting minutes back to the beginning of the commission to really pull this timeline together and understand, try to get insight to what the commissioners were thinking, what they were talking about through this process. There wasn't anything mentioned about that track. So our analysis of that is that it was purely some sort of clerical oversight and moving from the study list that Dr. Getman provided and finalizing our ADI list in the commission.
Okay, I'll say that. And I think when we have a conversation, I will talk a little bit more about, I have other questions on that, but I think it might take up too much time. So I'll table that for now. I think, and the last question I had was about the use of unemployment data. So to clarify, and that's for us here at the commission and anyone who's listening, unemployment data was only used for the largest municipalities?
Correct. It was only used at that point for when they were trying to identify a good proxy for arrest impact in those census tracts.
Thank you, Megan. That was everything I had for you.
Commissioner Camargo?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, fellow commissioners as well. I think all those questions are so valid and comments. Megan, I know you're here today and you're presenting, but I also want to just thank Tisa, Sabiel, and Andrew, because for you all to take this on as a side, project on top of your daily capacities is a big deal. And I think that anybody who has been around this industry knows that defining the disproportionately impacted areas is a big deal for Massachusetts and for the industry. There's always, people around the country looking at us to lead, and I think that this is very, it's an important issue. So I'm glad that we're back here, and I'm glad that we've taken our time. I know that we want to see things happen quickly, but I'm glad that we've taken our time and that we've done this. I guess it's more of a comment, Megan, in terms of expectations for September. I know that we had solicited feedback. So I'm wondering and hoping that we will be able to either see that feedback. I know you've condensed it, I'm sure, into your recommendations. But I guess I'm curious if we're also going to be able to see that. I know us as commissioners participated in some focus groups and circles that we had with folks around the country. So I guess I just want to put that out there that I'm hoping that we can see that. And I'm also hoping that we have enough time to process this for September. I think we all know here that we get our board books about 4 or 5 days before our meetings every month, and then we jump right into our meetings on top of our regular duties. So I don't know if there's a time frame for when we're going to be getting those documents, if it's different than what we usually see. And again, just thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Commissioner Concepcion for bringing up the Worcester Great Brook Valley census tract. I too have more questions around that for next month. Since they qualify based on all the criteria, I'm hoping in the recommendations put forth, something will be addressed around this census tract in Worcester.
Commissioner Camargo?
Yeah, Commissioner, not Commissioner, Megan. I almost gave you a whole new job, Commissioner Megan. Commissioner Doobie, Megan, do you mind answering my question?
Can you, I know that you had said a lot in that. What was the exact question that you had?
It was really, I guess my question was, are we going to be able to see some of the comments that were collected from the public? And some of the information that was discussed in some of those other meetings that we didn't participate in. And then what do you think the timeline is for when we're going to receive whatever it is that we're going to review to be ready for September?
So our team has been working to synthesize the information learned in those meetings and include that into how we're recommending next steps and policy considerations, rather than just kind of handing you a list of comments. As far as if that can be made available to you, that's something that our team and possibly the executive director can have that conversation around, if there's just an output from that we can provide to you. Regarding the timeline, we are planning to just have the typical timeline that when you get your materials, and I believe that there's a meeting set up for right after you get those materials. I know that that's very close in time. But that will be able to give you initial overview of what you'll expect at that public meeting. And then there'll be a little bit of time in between there if there's additional questions, and we'll see how we can address those. Also following, public meeting, open meeting law, of course.
Of course. And I do see our executive director on camera, but Mr. Executive Director, do you have any take on when we'll have these materials, and or are we going to have a little bit extra time, more than usual? What's your plan?
I guess through the chair, thank you, Commissioner Camargo. Thank you, Megan, especially in the Access and Equity DEI group. We'll provide the materials as soon as humanly possible. I think it's the easiest way to put it, the clearest way to put it. So I would obviously look to Megan and that team as far as their state of readiness and where they feel most comfortable with those materials. But yes, we would try to get them to you as soon as humanly possible. I also, if I may, I think an answer to Commissioner Concepcion's question as far as Dr. Getman's arrival at the commission. It was the tail end of October 2017. I believe the contract was executed with the Comptroller's Office, who at the time was serving in an interim CFO capacity. on October 31st of 2017. So actually predates even my arrival at the agency.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Thank you. Also, thank you, Sean, for that information as well. Megan, you mentioned something, and I just want to clarify what is happening from this point forward. So you all are going to proactively schedule times to meet with us to kind of go over our questions, or like what is the process in the interim between now and that September conversation?
Are you looking to answer that about this presentation or the September presentation?
So I'm not clear on if it's separate, if it's together. I just want to figure out what is the process.
Yep. So there is a meeting scheduled for you for the prep for the September presentation. I believe it's the Friday before, so it's right after you receive your materials and leading up to that meeting. For that one, it will be just a presentation. We won't be able to have a conversation following open meeting law because we can't have that back and forth. For if you have additional information about today's presentation, we can set up meetings about that information separately from that. And I would have to also work with the ED and general counsel to just make sure that we're, again, following the right process for open meeting law.
Can I have a clarification question, piggybacking on Commissioner Concepcion? So, and Sean, maybe this is a you question. So what's the expected, what's the expectation for September? So we have that presentation in September. What are we expecting after that or during that presentation?
So I think it's probably a combination of Megan and I can probably try to answer that. I think obviously the Access and Equity Group is preparing recommendations for you based on their observations and their findings. So it's something that I will learn in a way alongside you without much interference on my part. At the same time, I know I'm meeting with them, I want to say as early as next week to begin that process of forming those recommendations based on these observations. And that's not to suggest either that they're not already coalescing around recommendations. They've been stewing on it for quite some time. So I think I'll have a lot more clarity after that conversation as we build what those materials will be. I think ultimately it's up to the commission, your state of comfort with recommendations. You're also not locked into recommendation yes or no. You could obviously opine, make modifications, and agree with some, but not all. The presentation is ultimately to inform your deliberation. It's not as if it's an up or down vote, yes or no. So I just want to be clear that they're recommendations, but you weigh them.
Yep. And
Commissioner Roy, oh, sorry.
Go
Go ahead, Commissioner Concepcion.
I think it was Camargo.
Okay.
Yeah, do you have another question, Commissioner Camargo?
Commissioner Roy, go ahead.
Okay, just for clarity, are we voting in September or are we just receiving recommendations to process and vote at a future date?
And that may actually dovetail off of Commissioner Camargo's question a little bit as well. I would say that's up to you ultimately. If you agree with the recommendations wholesale, there's nothing to preclude you from voting. If you feel like you need more time and want to consider matters, also if you wanted to meet with members of the Access and Equity team to dissect even further, that too is your right. So ultimately it's going to be dependent upon your level of comfort. But they will be prepared to make recommendations. I think it's fair to say.
Just to follow up on what Megan said, maybe I misheard her. We're not able to ask questions after the next presentation. Is that accurate? Or did I maybe I didn't understand properly. Megan?
When we have that prep meeting with you, the Friday before public meeting, because all 5 of you will be in that prep meeting, we are not able to have discussion in that meeting following.
Okay, I see now during the prep meeting. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Commissioner Concepcion.
I want to offer a suggestion because this kind of goes off of, Commissioner Carmichael was asking about the time. And this is significant. We're talking about something that's really important. And Sean, thank you for saying that we will get the materials as soon as possible. I think that my suggestion is when we have that material, that follow-up conversation should also happen as soon as possible, just so that we're able to dissect the information and process it in a reasonable amount of time. So in other words, the Friday before meeting, I understand if that is what needs to be done, but if we can make it a little bit further from the actual meeting itself, if that's possible, then I would like that. So I can speak for myself. I think it's a good sort of way of going about this.
Sean?
Message received. I hear that.
And just from my vantage point, I don't know, again, to the extent that the presentation is made in September and there's discussion at the September meeting, if folks are not comfortable voting in September, then certainly I would be supportive of and in favor of moving any votes to an October meeting. So, perhaps that can be an option that's on the table as well.
I mean, we have to remind ourselves, Chair Kim, that we've tabled this since March of last year. So I think it was tabled for the right reasons and at the right time. So I think that, that makes sense as well, because this is, this will impact positive impact plans. This will impact SEP. This will impact, a lot of things. So thank you for that, that recommendation. Good job overall, Megan and team again.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, comments on this topic before we move on to the next item? Oh, great. Well, thank you again, Megan, and your team. Much appreciated. And we'll look forward to getting those materials for the September meeting. And with that, I have next on the agenda presentation and vote concerning the delegation of authority to administratively extend licenses on a limited basis. So, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the commissioners. This item is I'm seeking a delegation of authority from the commission. Therefore, would be requesting, I guess after a brief presentation, a vote to that effect if you're so inclined. I guess I want to try to paint a picture as to why I am in fact seeking this delegation. It's really on behalf of our investigations and enforcement team, including our licensing staff, who from time to time may run into a situation where a license expiration falls between meetings. They may also run into a set of circumstances where a renewal application for a licensee may not be able to be renewed based on a number of circumstances. It could be that the entity is not able to secure a certificate of good standing from another state agency, be it the Department of Revenue or the Department of Unemployment Assistance, or that an ongoing matter with us may make the renewal of a license not feasible for a period of time. So ultimately, this is something that we would use in very select and rare occurrences. I would also, I guess, like to use this opportunity to again remind our licensees that you have 60 days before your license expiration to submit a renewal application to the commission. We alert you to that upcoming expiration 150 days, 120 days, and 90 days before. So we therefore believe we give you ample opportunity and ample time to begin evaluating your renewal application, to begin acquiring all of the necessary certifications that would be required in the context of renewal application. There are circumstances where, again, if a licensee were to submit, say, 10 days before a license application is, or license, excuse me, set to expire, our staff would not reasonably be able to review that application. This is not meant to be punitive, but our inability to review that application does risk that license expiring. The license expiring is effectively a surrender of a license potentially. And so to avoid those circumstances, giving the commission staff the ability to administratively extend, the practical effect of that is ultimately that access to metric would not be turned off. Access to the medical use of marijuana operating system would not be turned off, and then giving us the ability to get this licensee to the next commission agenda, whereby the commission can review complete materials. So there's a set of circumstances, a variety of circumstances where this would be used. It would not be overused, and we would obviously develop an SOP accordingly to set those circumstances in a clear, predictable way. Again, making sure that ultimately the commission retains all authority to renew or approve licenses. This would just extend by a number of days. The recommendation here is 120 days, and I believe that would be the very, very distant end, and more often than not, it would be from month to month. So happy to take any questions you may have. But again, I view this as a limited delegation as far as scope is concerned.
Any questions for Mr. Collins on this issue? Commissioner Stebbins?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Executive Director. I read through the memo. I think I have two questions. My first is I took this administrative extension authority as a way of resolving what I would say are, and just help me whether I'm characterizing this the right way, those issues that might pop up that are beyond the scope of, I didn't get my, some of those perfunctory items as part of a renewal. Those are kind of set to the side. This is an issue that might be going on with our investigations and enforcement team. This is something a little bit bigger than, I'm still waiting on my DOR certificate because, as you pointed out, we give them plenty of advance notice to meet that. So I just want to make sure that I'm characterizing that correctly. And then secondly, can you give me an idea or a snapshot of the percentage or the number of licensees coming through this process that you've typically managed? Or I'm just trying to get a sense of what the workload is.
Sure. So to your first question, yes, I think given that we do provide folks that periodic notice at least 150 days out from their renewal application, or I'm sorry, the expiration of their license, those things that would need to be compiled, I don't think would be a sufficient justification to extend the license. And I think the commission, hopefully me remaining on a portion of a soapbox today is a good reminder for folks that they should continue to, they also should have ready access to these types of things. If you are making your payments in a timely way and you are up to date, this is really, to your point, a perfunctory process that you can go in and oftentimes get a PDF spit out within a matter of moments. So it shouldn't be that difficult. There might be circumstances where the commission is engaged with a licensee in a process, be it a compliance matter or something, or an investigation or review, and we'd like to, without making any misrepresentation to the commission, be able to speak to their status as a licensee in good standing as far as we are concerned. And so that would be one set of circumstances. As to volume, the best I can do is probably give you order of magnitude. It's not something we do frequently, but it is something that has been done historically. And so I would also view this as a kind of a ratification of process historically. It would likely be maybe at most in the dozens over the course of the commission's history, which being the 5-year time span. Granted, licenses being renewed, therefore, for about 4 years as opposed to the full 5. But it's not a frequent matter that we do. And it's also something that, again, as we kind of reconcile our process, we believe that it's imperative that we get this explicit delegation before moving forward with any future license extensions.
Just to follow up on that, I think I at least would welcome some type of update, if you want to come back to us with numbers to kind of just give us a sense of how this authority is working, and obviously maybe without talking about specific licensee names, at least helping us understand the nature of some of the issues as you've seen them arise.
Happy to.
Commissioner Roy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have two questions. Number one, is this an indefinite time period? In other words, in other delegation and administrative extensions, we've kind of put a review date or an end date certain, or I'm just wondering if this is a permanent authority. And also, I'm inclined to support it because there could be an increased need in anticipation of the language coming out of the bill. Before, we would just check the box that you had in HCA, and now upon renewal, correct me if I'm wrong, we will, if this bill becomes law, we will be doing a deep dive into the HCAs, and that might require some additional time. I'm just surmising at this point, but any thoughts around that, Executive Director, would be great.
Sure. I guess to maybe folding in just as a merged comprehensive answer, first off, I think this should be an indefinite authority. I would view this as being this should not be a routine practice, that the practice being extending of licenses, but I would ask that the delegation of that ability be a durable one, just given those circumstances that may come up in the future. So I guess I wouldn't be looking for a sunset as to this authority. At the same time, based on the pending legislation that we're obviously optimistic will soon become law, that HCA matter should be incorporated into an ongoing and routine renewal process. And I would not want to overextend this delegation such that we use it in a way that becomes I guess, an opportunity to not fully complete our tasks. I have the utmost and complete confidence in our staff to do that work in a timely way, so long as applicants and licensees are submitting their application materials in a complete and timely way. And so for us to effectively do our job, applicants and licensees are required by our regulations to submit their applications in a complete and timely way. So I wouldn't want to use this as an excuse or an escape from that workload. At the same time, I think to Commissioner Stebbins' point as well, there may be a set of circumstances where a renewal is not something we can realistically recommend at the time. If we grant ourselves 15 more days, 20 more days, we can get it to the next meeting and reasonably provide you with a recommendation. Otherwise, the recommendation might be that the license not be renewed or that the license simply lapse, which we would not want for anybody that is looking to continue their business.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Any other questions? Any last minute comments, Sean or Mr. Collins?
No, I appreciate your consideration.
So I guess then I would seek a motion pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 10, Section 76J, and Mass General Laws, Chapter 94G, Section 6A, to delegate to the Executive Director the Commission's authority to extend administratively up to 120 calendar days a license expiration date. During this administrative extension, the licensee shall continue to comply with the Commission's requirements for licensure and will be required to pay a prorated license fee to cover the extension. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Or motion made by, I'm sorry, Commissioner Camargo. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Roy. Any questions or comments? Concerns? Hearing none, then on the motion that has been seconded, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy. Sorry, Commissioner Roy. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Okay, Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Great. So this fourth item concerns recommendations from Agency General Counsel Bailey concerning certain closed executive sessions minutes of our public meetings. So General Counsel, I see that you're on now. I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I appreciate, as part of our biannual review of executive session minutes, the opportunity to present on legal's recommendations. Before I do so, I just want to acknowledge the role of our paralegal, Sabiel Rodriguez. So we work together to review the executive session minutes and develop these recommendations for the commission, including the memo that was circulated to the commission in advance of this meeting. So based on our review, we would recommend that the minutes from the July 2020 and June 2022 meetings be released. At both meetings, the commission returned to open session and voted on union-related matters. It no longer needs to retain its bargaining position. So for that reason, we would recommend that these two sets of minutes be released. In terms of our recommendation to withhold the minutes, I want to slightly revise our recommendation. Since the memo was circulated, the commission has held 2 additional executive sessions. So we would recommend that the commission continue to withhold the executive session minutes from the June, July, and August meetings of this year. The commission is relying on the mediation purpose for those executive sessions. That mediation is ongoing, so we believe that that basis continues to be relevant. In addition, we are recommending that the commission continue to withhold the October and November 2020 executive session minutes for an external reason. Those minutes are still protected by a protective order that was entered in a federal case. And since that order is still in place, we would recommend continuing to withhold those minutes. Just stepping out for a second, if the commission accepts our recommendation, they would be given or circulated the released minutes prior to the next public meeting. So they would have an opportunity to review and vote on those actual minutes. So essentially, we're asking the commission to vote on our recommendations here today.
Great, thank you, General Counsel. Any questions or concerns, Commissioner Stebbins?
Sure, and thank you, General Counsel. This all makes sense. I think it's fair to say, with respect to the 2 executive sessions we've had since July 1, that those would probably be covered in our next biennial review of meeting minutes to either withhold or disclose. We had a chance, obviously, you and I had a chance to talk about the minutes that we wish to release from July 9th of 2020. Obviously, the 5 of us were not here at the time. As Commission Secretary, I'd be happy to go back and review those minutes. And when we talk about them at the next meeting, hopefully be able to convey to my colleagues that I feel the minutes accurately reflect the discussions of those executive sessions so that we can make sure those get teed up for approval.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then I would then seek a motion to accept the recommendation concerning the withholding and releasing of certain executive session minutes as presented by General Counsel Bailey at today's meeting, August 11th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Stebbins. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Roy. Thank you. Any final questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none, then on the motion that has been seconded, I will take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. The motion carries. Let the record show that the motion was approved unanimously. Thank you. General Counsel.
Thank you, Chair.
Great. So we are now on the last item on the agenda. It's a continuation of the discussion that we had at our July 14th, 2022 meeting. And as promised at that meeting, during the discussion, Commissioner Stebbins has prepared some materials, and I will turn things over to him to lead this discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, colleagues. First of all, let me apologize that what I asked to be put in the book still had draft stamped on a couple of pages, but apparently you can conclude that it is still draft because, you know, we're looking for approval or some agreement from my colleagues as to whether to add this to future public meeting agendas. First of all, I want to thank my colleagues. It was a good conversation last week. Greatly appreciated them asking questions, raising comments and concerns about adding kind of a calendar about upcoming public meeting topics to discussion at future public meetings. For me, it helped to get all that feedback. It helped me to kind of put pen to paper and hopefully answer your questions and comments or address those in terms of this conversation. And again, I also wanted to add kind of a sample calendar to give you an idea of how the meeting topics would appear in a public meeting book. And I think even in a conversation with the chair, it'd be great if we found a way to actually put this calendar in a more public place on the commission's website, so it would be quickly accessible and viewable by the public, so they could see what some of the upcoming meeting agenda topics are. Again, I feel this not only helps us and it helps the staff to see what's coming up, but also to see potential timing of those discussions, as well as what staff and commissioners are working on those topics. Doesn't obviously set anything in stone. There's still the flexibility depending on our workload to move some items around. But I think it's a good way to give the public an idea of what we plan to address at a future meeting, as well as topics beyond that. So the calendar you see is part of the meeting packet. Again, looks ahead to the next two meetings, as well as some things that are under review for future consideration. Thank the executive director. He kind of gave me a great snapshot into some of the things that we want to have on the calendars ahead. But you know, I'd open it up to my colleagues. Again, I want to thank them for the conversation around this last week, as well as thinking through a process by which something is prepared and ready to be added to the agenda, and that any misconception that this talking about upcoming public meeting topics are really not just kind of a free-for-all, but it's actually organized, structured, and give us all the confidence that what will be before us has been thought through with respect to review and conversation, not only with the chair and the executive director, but an understanding of staff that might need to be included on some of these projects. I certainly heard you all loud and clear that that was a particular concern. So I'll stop there and certainly open it up to any questions or comments that my colleagues have.
Any questions from commissioners? Comments? Commissioner Roy?
I just want to thank Commissioner Stebbins for bringing this idea forward from his experience at the Gaming Commission. I see it as two buckets. So we have routine business that happens every year. So whether it's the electing of the secretary and the treasurer, or if it's the budget, or so, and then we have discussion and vote on unique items. So having said that, I think it's great to have the things we know we have to do every year. The routine items should be on there, and then for the discussion and vote on the unique things, or maybe we only do one time, I think that's where we need to have a little more discussion around those items.
Sure. If I can just jump in, Commissioner Roy, I think that's a great description of it. Obviously, and again, drawing on my experience at gaming, there was definitely consideration every month of, as you pointed out, those things that were kind of annual: election of new officers, applications, a date by which we had to approve applications or set deadlines, as well as we heard today, we know at our next meeting that there's going to be a topic and presentation from the Access and Equity DEI working group. So this calendar kind of becomes a combination of those perfunctory things. But again, I think it gives a great snapshot into what's the look ahead for the commission's work, what's the look ahead to future meetings, and trying to incorporate all those pieces. And when you as a commissioner or any of my other colleagues are bringing, and I love to use the example that Commissioner Concepcion worked on of the new governmental affairs approach, again, we could look at when that presentation was fully staffed, pulled together, and ready to be placed on a future agenda. And that, again, that's why I feel this tool is not only helpful for us, but it's also helpful for the public to kind of see that look ahead as well.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Concepcion? And you're on mute. Okay.
You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Commissioner Stebbins, thank you for this. Thank you for the materials that you provided and all the work and thought that you've committed to this. I think it's a really good idea. I had a question about so in the materials you provided, there's a line about in preparation for commissioners to discuss and adding items to the calendar. And you recommend sort of speaking with the executive director and working with the chair to present or formulate a final presentation. Can I just ask about the decision to have that as a recommendation as opposed to sort of like almost like a requirement? What was the reasoning?
I guess my reasoning would be just in terms of the urgency or the immediacy of the topic. So obviously, again, just going back on the example we had today with the Access and Equity Working Group, we knew this was coming. We knew there was a team working on this. That's kind of a longer range project that certainly builds itself into the calendar at some point. I wanted to offer a little flexibility that in advance of a meeting, if something suddenly became a priority or there was an urgent need to discuss something, that a commissioner could work with the chair, work with the executive director to say, I think it'd be helpful for us to have a presentation on X at the next meeting. But obviously that folds everybody in: the chair, again, who has the authority to set the agenda, the executive director, who I think best can assess staff availability and staff resources to, again, make a decision on having something placed on the calendar. So it's allowing us to be informative, but flexible and nimble, I think, at the same time.
Got it. I thank you for that breakdown. The calendar that you provided was really helpful. It helped me to sort of understand your thought process and what the recommendation is. So thank you.
Well, I should have echoed what we always tell the staff in terms of having a memo in on time, having it well thought out. So I appreciate everybody's patience, but the last meeting and this meeting have been a good conversation around the topic.
Commissioner Carmago?
Commissioner Stebbins, good job.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good job, good job. Thank you for putting this together. Again, I think that, to Commissioner Concepcion's point, we're creating these policies moving forward. We created the legislative policy, it's working, right? So we're looking for things that will work and not make it more complicated, but still has some kind of boundaries. Here's my, I hope this is a practical and simple question, but maybe it's not. Is there a calendar for the calendar? And what I mean by that is we all know sort of how we move right now, right? We're about to finish this public meeting today. We'll breathe for maybe a day or two, and then we're back in the, back on the cycle of getting ready for the next public meeting. So is there a timeline for when these items need to be discussed with the board chair and the ED? So how are we thinking around that? Or is it like, 48 hours, chair, executive director, I want to put something on here. So walk me through the practical phases of it and how do you see that? Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Sure. No, it's a great question. I think the way I envision it is when we get to this point in our future monthly commission meetings, we'd look at that schedule, and I think then turn to the executive director, turn to any, key staff to say, is there anything that you see on the calendar that's missing or that we should think about for an October meeting or November meeting, or put it under general review that it might happen at some point, and give us the chance to think about that at a public meeting, but at the same time, again, working through that we, in the intervening meeting time, you might have a conversation with the chair, with the executive director about an item, and then that item shows up in the book for the next public meeting, if that makes sense. So it's kind of two ways to add something to that public meeting agenda.
Commissioner Stubbins, and maybe I'm asking this to maybe all the commissioners, should we put something in there? Like, are we going to, do you want to adopt some language around that in the, in your memo? I'm just curious. And then I guess the other question is, I mean, our executive director is usually the person that we communicate the most in this place and gives us updates on everything in terms of what goes on the agenda, and the chair. How would we all know what's going to be on there? Let's say next month. I mean, like we have a draft right now, right? For next month, for example, I see it on here, but how do we, by the time we find out, it will be because it's already on the agenda. Does that make sense? Or am I not making sense? Commissioner Stubbins? No?
Are you asking me or the chair and the ED? I was
Okay.
not sure who you were addressing it to.
Sorry. I guess because you wrote the memo, I was kind of just asking you. I guess just to be very clear, my question is, we've been talking about sort of not knowing what folks are working on, or because of the open meeting law, sometimes we just don't know what's going on with each other, right? We're in sort of silos. So with this, I guess I'm just curious as to, for let's say next month, let's say you put something on there, Concepcion put something on there, and I put something on there. Well, then Roy and the chair will obviously know, but will Roy then know once it's on the agenda, or is there a conversation before about what's going to get on the calendar?
Okay, I think if I'm hearing your question correctly, it kind of ties back to, we can talk about items again at a public meeting that we say maybe this should be on a future calendar, but again, before having that conversation, I'm encouraging, as Commissioner Concepcion raised the idea of, in preparation for putting something on the agenda, have we had those conversations with staff, with the ED, and with the chair?
Yeah. And then I guess just to bring it one other level, Commissioner Stubbins, is will you put that language into this memo? Because once we're going to vote on this, I'm assuming, right? This is not just a discussion. So if we're going to vote on this, I want to make sure that process is clear and that we all know that, and that we know that's part of the process.
Okay, I'm happy to add that to that language to the memo.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Roy?
I just have a question. Where is this calendar found? So for us as commissioners, if it's a living, breathing document, is it on our intranet, or is it only when public agenda is posted? Like, when do we see this? Or is it a month we can access it, or once a month when we have meeting?
It's a great question. Obviously my original intent with this, that this became part of our public commission meeting agenda and it would be available in the book. And I think the chair came up with a great idea of working with comms on our website to see where else this might live so that the public could see it as well as they think about. There's a topic coming up that right now is scheduled to be on the October meeting agenda that maybe I'll listen into that October meeting, but I'm getting ahead of myself on that piece of it, Commissioner, because I haven't had a chance to talk with the comms team, but my goal is to hopefully have it live someplace else that the public could more readily and easily access it.
Mr. Collins, do you have a thought on whether or not it's feasible to put something like this onto our website?
It's always feasible. My concern would be the static nature of it, making sure it doesn't become stale at some point, and then also wanting to be with some sort of disclaimer that the agenda for a public meeting is the agenda. So if it appears on this sheet, it does not guarantee that it will be an item for an agenda. And quite the opposite. It may say it's coming in October's meeting, but the commission may actually do it in September if it's ready to go. So which governs? I'd want to make that abundantly clear to any audience. So it's not without potentially some management is just a caveat. So anything's feasible, especially when it's not me that's doing it. It's someone on our staff that is highly capable, I'm sure.
Right, absolutely. No, all those caveat, well, yes, all that language I agree with and I think is important. Commissioner Concepcion, your hand was moving up, but maybe move down.
You're perceptive, Chairwoman. I think I'm working through I'm processing a few questions that I have, and I want to make it concise so I'm not confusing either. I think I understand sort of the calendar on things that we anticipate generally, in the regular sort of course of the work that we do here. It's the component of us sort of offering new pieces that Commissioner Stebbins, I'm just welcoming you to my mind right now. I'm just kind of processing that a little bit more and just trying to understand its utility in this process, because I know that when we do have something that we want to work on and propose, we do it, and we can talk with the chairwoman as well about that, and including it on the agenda. So I'm processing that. So that more comment, I don't know.
Yeah.
No. Great question. And if you'll permit me, I'll step into your mind a little bit. No, I think Commissioner Roy started off this conversation by thinking of this as two buckets, things we do on an annual basis, whether it's election of officers, kind of close out of the budget. There's things that just kind of get naturally built into the timeline and built into a calendar. But I want to go back to specifically, and I'll call out the great approach that you laid out for when we discussed a new governmental affairs approach. There was a lot of work done behind the scenes. There was a working group that went through the internal kind of charter process, and then when there was a product that was ready to go, it was working with the chair, working with the ED, and say November is the right time to have this on the calendar for lots of different reasons. So as we would get into a public meeting and get to this kind of calendar portion, that to me would be the opportunity that you would say, I've got this project, we all agree it's ready to go, we think it should be on the November agenda. Does that make a little more sense?
That makes sense.
I will now step out of your mind, so
I appreciate you.
Not to confuse you.
Thank you.
I feel like this is like Total Recall, that movie from the 80s. Okay, Sean Collins says no.
Or The Matrix.
Yes, okay, The Matrix.
I've just never seen them.
Oh, that's right. That's a whole other discussion. Sean Collins and his movie, what movies
have to
he's
table
watched and
that.
which movies he has not watched.
Madam Chair, if there are no other questions, I would just say, happy to work with you. We can add this to, add the calendar to the next public meeting agenda. In the meantime, I'll adopt some of Commissioner Camargo's language that she'd like to see in the memo, just so that kind of becomes a good reference point for staff and commissioners, kind of an SOP in some regard, for people to understand how to access and use this and why it can be part of future agenda, future public meetings.
That sounds terrific. Thank you, Commissioner. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions or comments on that? Oh, Commissioner Concepcion?
Just thank you. Commissioner Stebbins, thank you for your patience. Thank you for all of your work. Just thank you. That's all.
Thank you for all your patience.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Stebbins, I'm gonna wait till this actually plays out to thank you. I'm gonna see how this works out next month.
All
I gotta
right.
I gotta be honest. I appreciate you, but I gotta see how this works out in a practical matter.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay. With that, it sounds like we can move on to the next item, which is new business not anticipated at the time the notice was posted. Anything? Hearing nothing. So the next most immediate meeting date is September 8th, 10 a.m. via the same Teams. And then the other meeting dates are outlined here on the slide. I want to give my thanks to folks the 72 folks who stayed on to the bitter end. Appreciate you all. Appreciate all of you commissioners and Mr. Executive Director. And I guess any other final comments before I seek a motion to adjourn? Okay, hearing none, I seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Camargo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Roy. I assume no questions, comments, or objections. So on the motion that has been seconded, the roll call vote, Commissioner Camargo.
Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Motion to adjourn unanimously voted. Thank you and see you all next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.